Good evening, and welcome to our third Mary Talk of the season. My name is Jeremy Vaughn. I am a development officer in the Office of Advancement here at Mary Washington, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. We are excited to host a diverse audience for tonight's presentation, which includes students, parents, friends, and alumni, not only from across the country and beyond, but from a wide range of classes spanning from 2024 all the way back to 1948, a total of 76 years. There will be time at the conclusion of tonight's presentation for our guests to answer questions. Feel free to ask a question by clicking on the Q&A icon below and submitting there, or you can vote for other submitted questions to help them rise to the top of the list. At this time, I'd like to introduce Gabriel Lewis, class of 2019, who will introduce our speaker for this evening. Gabriel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy, and good evening, everyone. Adrian has a master's in communication studies from Wake Forest University and joined the coaching staff at UMW in 2006. In 2020, Adrian assumed the role of director of the UMW Speaking Center. Adrian debated for Wake Forest in the 90s, winning multiple national tournaments and reaching the semifinals of the National Debate Tournament twice. She and her partner were also awarded the prestigious Rex Copeland Award as the top-ranked team during the regular season. Since then, Adrian has coached at Wake Forest, Michigan, Northwestern, Richmond, and is now the director of debate at the University of Mary Washington. In over 25 years of coaching, her teams have won nearly every tournament on the national and regional circuits, including 4 National Debate Tournament championships and multiple American Debate Association national championships, including 2 here at UMW. In 2020, Adrian was ranked 6th in the top 10 coaches of the decade and was also named the top outstanding judge of the decade. Adrian also has a long record of service to the debate community, including service as the president of the American Debate Association, and currently is the chair of the National Debate Tournament, which is the oldest collegiate debate championship tournament. I met Adrian at the Gonzaga Debate Institute as a rising high school senior in 2014. Adrian was my instructor during the 5-week camp and even continued answering my frequent strategy and research questions throughout my senior year of high school, despite her being busy coaching her own teams. It is because of Adrian that I decided to move from Salt Lake City, Utah to attend UMW. During my 4 years of debating for Adrian, I improved my critical thinking and research skills to levels I never thought possible. I am incredibly grateful to Adrian and the many lessons that she taught me, and am honored to have spent 4 years debating for her. Even now that I am no longer a collegiate debater, we talk nearly every day as she's become one of my closest friends and my biggest role models. It is now my honor to present tonight's guest as she presents Why Debate Matters, Lessons Learned While Arguing. Adrian, the floor is yours. Welcome to Mary Talks.
Thank you, Gabe, for that very kind introduction and for joining us all the way from Utah. Gabe was a great student and an outstanding debater at UMW. He was part of one of our biggest upset victories in team history against Harvard, and he's been an incredibly supportive alum and a very good friend. I'd also like to thank Jeremy and UMW's Offices of Alumni Relations and Events for the invitation to speak with you this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the larger UMW community about this important subject. $73 million. That's the number of people who Nielsen reported watched the first presidential debate last fall. If we were in person, now is when I'd ask how many of you watched that debate. Instead, I'll ask you to think for a moment about what you remember about that debate, either from the debate or the coverage afterwards. I'll give you a couple of moments to think about it. My guess is that many of your recollections were probably on balance negative. After all, this was the debate that was roundly panned. The reviews included a disgusting night for democracy, according to James Fallows, writing in The Atlantic. On Twitter, Anna Navarro declared the performance to be completely disrespecting the millions of Americans who tuned in hoping to see a debate of ideas. And Mark Thiessen, a Washington Post columnist, noted, Tuesday night saw the first of 3 scheduled presidential debates. I would not be surprised if it were the last. Shortly after the conclusion of the debate, Jake Tapper from CNN summed up what many were thinking. That was a hot mess inside a dumpster fire, inside a train wreck. We'll talk about who won the debate and who lost the debate. One thing for sure, the American people lost. Two political scientists from Harvard and Stanford also sounded the alarm. The first presidential debate landed with an unpleasant thud. A CBS YouGov poll found that 83% of voters who watched the face-off found the tone negative, and moderator Chris Wallace expressed regret that it had descended into such a circus. Trump and Biden focused on the failings and shortcomings of the other candidate rather than making a positive case for themselves. In short, the debate was the equivalent of one very long negative advertisement. What kind of effect is such a grim tone likely to have on the race? The research suggests that it will turn off independents and moderate voters and further polarize an already deeply divided electorate. There is cause for concern. That one debate was symptomatic of a larger trend in our political discourse. Many think our discourse is too hostile, divisive, toxic. The events of January 6th were obviously extraordinary and hopefully an extreme anomaly. But every day, run-of-the-mill examples abound. Elected officials in Congress disparaging fellow members, state government officials, sometimes within the same party, turning on each other, local council and school board meetings devolving into shouting matches, and don't even get me started about the arguments that erupt around our family dinners at the holidays. Debate has taken on a pejorative connotation. Debates are heated. We're being argumentative, too argumentative. I'll tell you, that puts us debate coaches and our students in a very awkward position. When we travel to competitions, we're often asked by people we meet along the way, people at the hotel, cab drivers, etc., why we are traveling. We proudly tell them we're the UMW debate team on our way to a tournament, and we often get a funny look followed by, well, I don't want to debate you, or you must be the argumentative type. I want to believe that they mean well, that they're trying to be funny or respectful of our talents, but we often worry that they have a negative impression of debate. We often follow up with an elevator pitch about why debate is great, and I do know we convinced at least one Uber driver to encourage his kids to join their school's debate team. We consider that a much better outcome than the times we've been challenged to impromptu debates at an airport gate. So this evening, you're going to get the extended elevator pitch about why debate matters, lessons learned while arguing. We'll talk a little bit about what debate means, what lessons we learn in debate, and how those lessons can be applied to dialogues beyond our squadron. The alternate title might be How We Learn to Stop Worrying and Love Debate. Part 1. What is debate? What does it mean? How do we do it? Debate can be defined as both a noun and a verb. As a noun, debate is a discussion between people in which they express different opinions about something. So when we talk about why debate matters, we're talking about why those discussions matter. As a verb, debate is to argue about or engage an opponent in debate, or to think about something such as different opinions in order to decide. So now, when we say why debate matters, like why debate matters of national significance, we are talking about why we should argue about or think about options in order to make decisions, i.e., why we should debate about matters. In this conversation, I want us to think about both those things, why debates or discussions about differing opinions matter, and why we should think or argue about matters in order to make decisions. We debate debates all the time. We debate about what to have for dinner. We debate about politics. We debate about movies and books and policies and actions. Since we do it so often, we should aim to make it less of a negative and more of a positive. Let's debate better. What has debate looked like throughout history? What we think of as debate likely began in ancient Greece. Think Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the birth of democracy toward the end of the 5th century BC. In the 1700s, first in England and then here in the US, debate societies began to form. Public debates and competitions began. In 1815, the Cambridge Union was founded in England, which is believed to be the oldest continuous debate society. In the 1930s, collegiate debate teams traveled near and far to debate, holding exhibition debates for large audiences who would vote to decide who won and who lost the debate. The Wiley College debate team, depicted in the movie The Great Debaters, faced opponents all over the country, including the reigning national champions from the University of Southern California, as well as outside the country, including the Oxford Union in England. On the far right in that picture, you may recognize a young James Farmer, who was one of those great debaters and would go on to found the Congress of Racial Equality, lead the Freedom Rides in the 60s, and eventually teach at what was then Mary Washington College. What has UMW debate looked like throughout history? Mary Washington, then known as the State Normal and Industrial School for Women, was debating as early as 1933. In the 30s and 40s, our students both debated and hosted tournaments. By the 60s, the Mary Washington Debate Club was competing in policy debate on the National Debate Tournament circuit. In 1968, they debated about universal basic income. The resolution was resolved that the federal government should guarantee a minimum annual cash income to all citizens. By the 90s, we were regularly qualifying teams to the National Debate Tournament and reached the elimination rounds for the first time in 1994. In the 2000s, our team has excelled. We not only frequently qualify to the National Debate Tournament, but we've been ranked in the top 16 teams 4 times in that period, and we've reached as far as the semifinals. In 2014, UMW debate team members Colin and Tom, pictured here on the left, won the American Debate Association National Championship while debating about limiting the president's war powers. And just a couple of weeks ago, Avery and Ainsley, pictured on the right, won the American Debate Association's Fall Championship while debating about reforming antitrust law, specifically in the area of blockchain patents. And in case you're wondering how we've continued to debate during COVID, I thought you might want to see a before and after comparison. When the Commission on Presidential Debates announced that the second presidential debate would be virtual, Trump withdrew from the debate, saying, "I'm not going to waste my time on a virtual debate." That was about a month into our debate season, and thousands of students from middle school, high school, and college clearly disagreed. All of last season and most of this season have successfully moved online, and those debates are valuable. On the left is a picture of one of the last public debates we held in person in the fall of 2019 in Lee Hall. On the right is the championship round we debated in last month on Zoom, where most of our debates are held today. The modern debater can now add serious Zoom skills to the many skills they develop in debate. As an educational enterprise, debate has been central to the pursuit of excellence in liberal learning for more than 2,500 years. A debate education hones the skills of civic engagement and democratic participation by enhancing communication skills, generating critical thought and reflection on the significant public issues of the day, and promoting in-depth study and rigorous research on a wide variety of complex subjects. The debate program at UMW provides undergraduate students with an opportunity to enhance their educational experience by participating in a wide variety of debate activities, including intercollegiate debate competitions. Our debate team is open to students of all levels. We compete in novice, junior varsity, and varsity tournaments. We pride ourselves on being a squad that serves all students, regardless of experience. This season already, our debaters have had 44 debates, 2 tournament wins, given 22 hours worth of speeches, and participated in almost 9 hours of cross-examination in which they ask and answer questions with their opponents. 9 hours. We also host 2 tournaments a year, a fall tournament that draws teams from across the country, and in February, we host the qualifier for the national tournament. We also hold public debates. In recent years, we've debated getting rid of the Electoral College, mandating vaccines, how to address climate change, and tomorrow evening, we will be debating the topic resolved. Social media platforms are valuable forums for public debate. If you're interested in seeing us debate, we'll post the link to that debate to register for it in the chat, and we can talk about that at the end again as well. We also have practicum courses for which students can receive credit for participating in the debate program. So now that we know a little bit about what debate means and what it has looked like over time, let's turn to the second part of our conversation, lessons we can learn from debating. So I could talk for hours about the lessons I've learned since I first joined my high school's debate team when I was 14. I am very passionate about the value of debate. Debate enhances an infinite number of skills that are useful across almost any field or career. To name a few: public speaking, persuasion, critical thinking, confidence, research, argumentation, interpersonal communication, teamwork, advocacy, organization skills, conferencing and travel skills, fair play, strategy, familiarity with numerous academic disciplines. But tonight, I'm going to focus on 3 sets of skills that you can try to practice and use on your own to evaluate debates and participate in debates. Those skills are information literacy skills, listening skills, and perspective taking skills. We'll talk about what those skills are, why they're needed, and how debating enhances them. So first up, information literacy skills. These skills are a combination of the abilities to process, analyze, and utilize information effectively. Why do we need those skills? Well, in short, 2 words: fake news. The Aspen Institute formed a commission to investigate information disorder, and they recently released their report, which analyzes the causes and effects of widespread information disorder. Those effects, among others, include a weakening of trust in institutions, fractured political discourse, and rampant misinformation that can undermine a democratic society. The graphic here identifies 7 common forms of information disorder, many of which you have probably encountered. For instance, satire or parodies that can fool people, misleading content, imposter content where someone is impersonating a qualified source, fabricated content, false connection where headlines, visuals, captions don't necessarily support the content, false context where real information is infused with false context in the background, manipulated content, which is when real information is manipulated in order to deceive. These issues are amplified when we absorb them passively, especially when we're casually scrolling through social media. So, how does debate enhance information literacy skills? Well, to begin with, debate encourages active and critical engagement with arguments. You can't just wing it in debates. You have to do research to back up your arguments with evidence if you want to win debates. Also, debate can help expose, or debate training can help expose fallacious reasoning. The argumentation and research skills learned in debate help debaters identify disconnects between the research presented and the conclusions that are being drawn from it. We'll talk about a few examples. One type of fallacy that people are probably pretty familiar with is the hasty generalization. That's generalizing without sufficient evidence or absent recognition of other evidence that trends in the other direction. We've all seen some examples of this. A pretty famous one is when Senator Inhofe brought a snowball into the Senate as proof that there was no global warming. Sensationalist headlines are another example. Debate teaches you to look beyond the initial claims to see if the evidence adds up and if the evidence comports with other known information. Another type of fallacy is a straw argument. This was formerly known as a straw man, but we're going to call it a straw argument now, in which you argue against a weaker version of an argument, i.e. you're fighting against straw, which is weak. For instance, when Trump would criticize Democrats for advocating for open borders, they don't actually advocate that. Or when Obama would criticize Republicans for wanting to gut all healthcare, they don't actually advocate that. Those are examples that are picking on an extremist and weak version of their opponent's arguments, a caricature perhaps, in order to demolish a weaker argument while distracting or avoiding the stronger arguments made by your opponent. A third type of fallacy we'll talk about real quick, because this one's funny, is ad hominem arguments. And this is probably the one that we see most frequently. That's when you attack the person to discredit their argument. For example, the name calling in that first presidential debate. Think about it for a second. You might be thinking, oh, right, when Trump called Biden Sleepy Joe. Except he actually didn't do that in that debate. He's called him that many other times, but I'm talking about the 2 times that Biden called Trump a clown during the debate. 2 times. He did later apologize, but Even if those arguments were true, that Biden is sleepy or Trump is a clown, does that undercut the legitimacy of their policies or arguments? No, probably not. It's basically name calling. Name calling is typically fallacious and is an example of where a claim, Trump is a clown, or evidence doesn't really support the broader conclusion that he necessarily has bad policies. Next, debate teaches you to question sources. Is the source real? Is the author credible? Is the author qualified? Is the author biased? UMW debaters are known for reading author qualifications when we cite our research in debates. And those of you from the debate community that are here, including some of our debaters, are maybe groaning about that. Not very many debaters do read the qualifications, and I sometimes get pushback from our debaters at first, but reading the author's qualifications reinforces that we should be finding the most qualified sources on an argument. If we plan to read the qualifications aloud, we will err toward picking authors who are qualified because we want them to be sources that we can defend. Citing a respected national level White House correspondent about Biden's negotiations with Congress on infrastructure will be more helpful to our argument than citing a local newspaper's weekly opinion column. Additionally, debate fosters lateral research on both sides of the issue. Lateral research is when you read multiple sources on an issue in order to get a wider set of perspectives and confirm that the research is supported. That's as opposed to vertical research, which is when you, for instance, you stay on the same website and kind of read the about page or things like that. Well, the about page is going to tell you they're qualified because of course they're going to tell you they're qualified. So lateral research can help with identifying whether other sources confirm it or whether it's potentially a parody. If you can't find anybody else who talks about it, it might be a joke or it might be satire. Debate also encourages research on both sides for two reasons. First, we have to debate both sides of the topic. One round, we're affirmative, affirming antitrust reform, and the next round, we're negative, rejecting antitrust reform. So we have to research both sides. But second, to beat an opponent's argument, you need to understand it. So that often means reading their sources to learn more about the argument before you go too far down the wrong path trying to answer it. So once again, we have reason to research both sides. Researching both sides means you are more likely to catch errors or forms of information disorder, like misleading content or false connections that we spoke about a few moments ago. And finally, debate bolsters processing and organization of information. In order to make an argument or organize a strategy, debaters need to process and organize the information in order to deploy it coherently and effectively in a debate. In the course of that process, debaters end up exposing flaws in the argument. What pieces of the argument puzzle are missing? If something's missing, the argument won't win. All right, that was a lot, but hopefully you stuck with me. Maybe I should have gone to this one first. Listening skills. What are these skills? Actively listening for comprehension, like in the two pictures here. In these pictures, we are taking very careful notes while listening to debates. Why are listening skills important to debate and dialogue? Listening attentively improves communication. Paying attention is crucial to effective communication and dialogue. Listening skills also assist with processing and retaining, i.e. learning, information and perspectives. And lastly, listening skills demonstrate engagement and investment in the dialogue. It helps show that you are arguing in good faith. If someone doesn't seem to be listening, the dialogue is more likely to break down. So, how much do everybody talks about debaters talking, how much listening they do. Debaters actually do a lot of listening. They listen to, in every debate, a debater listens to 6 speeches by their opponents and partner. And there are also 4 cross-examination periods in every debate in which questions and answers are exchanged. In order to effectively answer opponents' arguments and advance arguments made by your side in a debate, students have an incentive to actively listen. Second, flowing. Debaters are taught to take copious notes. That's what we were doing in the pictures on the previous slide. We call it flowing, which improves comprehension and retention of those arguments. Now, no one can write down every word, so debaters develop abbreviations as a form of shorthand and learn how to process keywords and concepts pretty quickly in order to be able to write them down during the course of a speech. The pictures on the right here are flows, and the alternate colors represent the teams responding to each other. The notes help you keep track of the arguments in a debate and facilitate actually responding to what your opponent has said. And the next part of how debate reinforces good listening is that there are no interruptions in debate. Debaters do not interrupt each other's speeches. In some forms of debate, they do, but in the style that we compete in, there's a very strong norm against interrupting your opponent. Now, again, a lot of dialogues break down when there are interruptions. I'll refer you back to that first presidential debate. In most college debates, we don't need to threaten a mute button in order to deter or silence interruptions. The norm against interruptions helps reinforce focused and engaged listening because you don't even have the opportunity to interrupt or derail an argument while it's happening. So you may as well keep listening. Next, perspective taking skills. What are those skills? Those are looking beyond your own point of view or your own argument. It is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Why are those skills important to debate and dialogue? Well, first of all, it improves communication. Understanding where the other side is coming from can open up lines of communication. It is more effective than just saying the other side is wrong. It also improves understanding the other side. Dialogue is improved if you understand the other sides of an issue. A genuine effort to understand the other side demonstrates a sincerity on your part to further the dialogue, i.e. that you're participating in good faith. Dialogues are easily derailed if someone thinks you are not trying to understand their side. Also, perspective-taking skills, empathy is pretty important there. Empathy can help you adjust your approach to a dialogue. If you understand where they are coming from, you might be able to find common ground or other ways to sustain the dialogue instead of it breaking down because of a lack of appreciation for the other side's needs and positions. And lastly, this is important because critical reflection is good. Putting yourself in their shoes encourages critical reflection on your own arguments. That's a good thing because you may not always be right, or you may need to sometimes rethink some of your positions. So how does debate foster perspective-taking skills? Switching sides. Debaters switch sides. Like I said before, one round they're arguing in favor of national healthcare system. The next round they're arguing against a national healthcare system. They may not be walking a mile in someone else's shoes, but they're at least trying those shoes on for a few rounds every tournament. Next, debate provides strategic incentives to think about the opponent's arguments. Debate is like a game of chess. You need to think multiple moves ahead if you want to win. You need to predict what their best arguments are and what they will say in response to each of your arguments. And you want to be charitable to their arguments in that process. It is not strategic to prepare to debate the worst opponent, so you prepare against the best or most charitable versions of their arguments, and in the process, learn more about the other side's perspective. Also, research. The process of researching to be prepared for both sides and to understand your opponent's argument exposes you to research and literature outside of your comfort zone. It takes us out of the echo chamber, the place where we tend to absorb news and information from sources that agree with us. Those echo chambers we live in result in confirmation bias, which is a tendency to interpret new evidence or new information as confirmation of your pre-existing beliefs. Researching both sides of the issue takes us out of the echo chamber and exposes us to arguments we may not have chosen to learn or read about otherwise. Argument testing. Sometimes in the process of working through arguments, debaters have a moment when their previously held opinions evolve because the arguments and evidence do not hold up. Debaters sometimes have moments after doing tons of research on an issue where they say, I can't answer this argument because it's true. And those are often moments when they have learned some new information that has changed their previously held worldview. All right, in this third and final section, we're going to talk about how to apply those lessons, i.e. what are the concrete things you can do to help you evaluate debates and engage in debates. Small changes can make a big difference. I'll cover tips for improving information literacy, tips for listening better, and tips for perspective taking. First, tips for improving information literacy. First, do lateral research. Read multiple articles about an issue. When I was growing up, I took a city bus to get to my junior high, and every morning at the bus stop, I would read the headlines on the front pages of the 3 newspapers in the newspaper vending machines that were on the corner: the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post. So for any given issue, I was looking at multiple headlines and getting very different takes on each issue. A lot of days I could only get the headlines because I didn't have enough change to buy all the newspapers from the vending machines. But even seeing the contrast in the headlines was helpful in seeing multiple angles on a single issue. No one needs change for the newspaper vending machines anymore. Alternative perspectives are only a few clicks away. Also, don't just read social media content. Try reading longer pieces that cite sources and research to support their arguments. Second, question sources. Think about whether it is a credible source, a biased source, a qualified source. Third, question the content. Look for fallacious arguments, for where the arguments don't add up. Identify disconnects between the evidence they're presenting and the conclusions they are drawing from that evidence. Second, tips for improving your listening skills. First, actively listen. Okay, try not to go inside your own head answering their arguments or refuting their arguments or thinking about your next argument. Focus on the speaker. Okay, give them your undivided attention. Looking at them can often help, and it can also be helpful because you can then process some of their nonverbal communication cues. You also want to minimize distractions. Okay, now is not the time to be playing with the phone, for example. You know what I'm talking about. Number 2, take notes. I'm not saying you need to write everything down. When you're watching a debate, you might take note of things you find important or that you want to learn about, or maybe make a note when one side makes an argument that you want to pay attention to see how the other side answers. When you are actually involved in a discussion or debate about something, taking notes can also be helpful for keeping track of the conversation and to help make sure you address the arguments. Our memories are not perfect, and taking notes can help us retain the points being made so we can review them, whether we're watching or engaging ourselves in a debate. And third, don't interrupt. Remember, the point is to listen better. If you're interrupting, you're not listening. It can help sometimes to take slow breaths when you find yourselves tempted to interrupt. Some folks will tell you to count to 10, but I always found if you're counting, you're probably not listening. It turns out at least I am a lot better at breathing and listening at the same time than I am at counting and listening at the same time. And third, finally, tips for perspective taking. First, switch sides, okay? Watch a different channel, read a different news site, buy a different magazine or newspaper. I once had a free subscription offer and I chose to subscribe to a magazine I would never have read otherwise. And while I didn't love it or agree with it, the year that I had that subscription, it did help me to better understand where the other side was coming from on various issues. I'm also one of those people who will flip back and forth between the cable news channels to see how one channel is addressing the issue versus the other and who they're talking to and what arguments are being made. Doing that does give me insights into the other side's perspectives on the issue. Second, practice empathy. Try to think about why they hold the positions they hold. If you're in an argument, with a friend or family member, you could even ask them what has shaped their opinion on the issue. And similarly, when you think about that, you want to ask yourself some questions. Ask yourself, what is it about your experience, your social location, your research that might influence why you see it differently? Third, be kind. Be kind to both their argument and to them. So be kind to their argument. Again, you should remember to consider their argument charitably. You should assume the best version of it. It will help you better understand the arguments and appreciate where they're coming from. But also be kind to them. Put yourself in a mindset that assumes the best of the side that you disagree with. They might be family, a friend, a boss, your president. Try to think of them as having good intentions. I'm not saying that that's possible in all cases, but it goes a long way to preventing a debate or dialogue from breaking down or escalating if you try to think of it in kindness terms. Remember, the beginning of our conversation this evening, the goal is engagement, to keep the conversation moving forward. We want people engaged in political discourse, not alienated by it. Ending up in a screaming match, not ideal. Someone storming out, not ideal. Having no more debates between politicians, not ideal. More dialogue is generally good, and kindness can help further it. So, that first presidential debate was not the last presidential debate, and our national dialogue is not over. Debate matters, and we will debate matters. Recent polling by Public Agenda and USA Today shows that while many are pessimistic about the tone and tenor of our national conversations and debates, most Americans value differences of opinion and dialogue, and many are trying to connect across partisan lines. Robert Leighton of the Brookings Institution, notice the qualifications, has written a book advocating for debate-centered instruction. Leighton argues that in an ideal world, everyone, not just students, should be trained in debate skills to foster civic engagement and discourse. Tonight, I hope I've played a small part in answering that call, with some tools to help you prepare, and that everyone is a little more ready to debate. So I am a debate coach, and we have to cite our sources. So we're gonna get 2 more slides in here real quick before Jeremy takes over. So bear with me. These are the works I've referenced throughout the talk. And these are the credits for all the images that appeared on the slides. And lastly, if you're looking for more information about the team or our events, please follow us on the internet. We're looking forward to broadening our reach beyond our team, our classrooms, and our campus. And thank you for being a wonderful audience. I look forward to your questions and feedback. And now, as we say in debate, I am ready for cross-examination.
This was fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, the first question I'm seeing is a question about our students. Do many of the Mary Wash debate team go to law school? I was an appellate attorney. What great training for an attorney.
I would say it probably was more so earlier, but we do get a decent number of UMW debaters do go on to law school, and a large number of debate people in general go on to law school. It is fantastic training for law, but it also happens to work really well for a lot of other positions. We've had folks in a variety of fields, including international studies and a bunch of other places. We actually have a pretty big track record of our people going on to coach other debate teams. Go figure.
Okay. The next question I have, this came via text. This is all very helpful for debating someone who has factual information, but what recommendations do you have for conversing with someone who may be utilizing false information or anything in that vein?
Yeah, that's obviously the common problem that we have encountered in the last several years, especially with the internet. So when people don't have common facts or they accuse whatever you say of being fake news, basically kind of applying the things that I talked about, knowing the research and arguments, so like having some facts on your side and being familiar with them, but also the approach to talking or having conversations with folks like that needs to be, and this is where kindness and listening come in. You need to be respectful and listen to what they're saying. You need to hear them out. The conversation breaks down the moment there's name calling or no, everything you're saying is fake or you're wrong or your sources are bananas. That's when the conversation breaks down. So, again, actually switching sides yourself and putting yourself in their position and asking why is it they think this way, so gradually, for instance, trying to get them to look at some other sources or introducing other sources into the conversation to try to establish some common sets of facts can help try to move the dialogue forward. Can't hear you, Jeremy.
I just shared the link. I've gone all year without making that mistake. 2021. I just shared the link that you'd given me before. Can you recount that again, please?
Yeah, so we are having the debate team is having a public debate on Zoom tomorrow. And so if you would like to join us for that, the link is in the chat, and the debate is on the question of whether social media are valuable platforms for having public debates. And so it a little bit stemmed from the conversations I was having with the team about this talk, but also we've been debating about antitrust all year, which has a large intersection with Facebook and social media. And so we have had a bunch of discussions about how valuable is social media in terms of democracy or not.
Fantastic. All right, next question. Some people have the ability to sound authoritative about things they're factually wrong about, and others who are true authorities are very meek. When people who are listening don't know the facts, they're easily swayed by self-confidence of the speaker. Can you comment on that?
Yes, that is that's definitely the case. I do think this gets to in part where taking some notes sometimes to follow up, because you shouldn't automatically assume, you know, you should all go research what I said tonight. I'm not, I have a lot of experience in this area, but you should be fact checking me. You should ask yourself, just because Adrian says it authoritatively, does that mean it's necessarily true? Maybe it comports with things, but you should take notes, and you should consider, other perspectives on things. And that also gets back to reading other sources that aren't necessarily your own. Because otherwise, you could very easily, like, I know some of the folks here are debate folks, and so of course you probably think a lot of what I said was reasonable. But that's where the confirmation bias kicks in, where you're kind of agreeing with things, or you're reading things as, things that you've already come to believe. And so that's where looking at other sources, we got to remind ourselves to do that, to try to help not get trapped into thinking that somebody's an authority when they may not be.
That's a perfect segue into the next question. What best practices do you have for people to research their sources?
So there are a handful of, like, one of the slides that had like kind of a list of things to be checking. You should be, kind of always looking for who the author is and what their qualifications are, but also who are they citing. You should be laterally reading, looking to see if, the person they're citing is credible, if the other sources agree with this. I myself have occasionally, and I catch myself, I've occasionally fallen for fake news. I've seen something on the internet and gone, oh, hey, that's wild. Well, I remind myself to go check right away, to make sure that, even if it's CNN or somebody that I do think is kind of pretty good about a lot of their reporting, I go look to see if others are saying it as well. And so that's where the lateral research part comes in, is to figure out if others are confirming it. Now, there are some things where there is an echo chamber where people will reconfirm things that are not true or are kind of sketchy. And so that's, again, trying to figure out some sources that you think are dependable and consistently get things right, which nobody gets everything right. Some things will, there will be times where sources have to issue corrections and things like that. But, I try to, for instance, read the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal on questions, so that I can kind of, I'm not saying they're the only authorities, but they're pretty reliable, or they catch each other when one of them kind of messes up. And so checking your sources and reading other sources to make sure that others confirm it can be helpful.
Okay. I think this is another research question talking about training your students to evaluate qualifications. An example here, a lot of presumptions exist about white men in academia being qualified, but lots of kinds of sources can carry truthful arguments.
Yeah, there has been a pretty significant movement in debate in the last 25 years or so to be a lot more careful about the sources that we're using, and to be more inclusive about the sources that we're using. In the early stages, when people started to first initiate those conversations, they would often ask us what the race or identity qualities were of our various authors. And we quickly realized, oh yeah, we're probably reading a bunch of white male academics. And so we've tried to be a lot more conscious about making sure that we look for alternative sources. And so, we're better about that. Are we perfect? No. And some of the areas that we end up debating are still overrepresented in terms of the research by, we had a space topic a couple of years ago. Would I say that most of the research we read about space was from a wide array of diverse authors? No, probably not. But we are trying to be more conscious about that. And we went looking for them. We go looking for authors that aren't necessarily within kind of the standard canon in whatever field that we're looking at.
Interesting. What is the process for determining subject matter for the debates that you hold? I assume we're talking about competitions and the things like that.
So we, in the particular form of debate that we do competition-wise, we debate the same topic for the whole year. And what happens is Basically, a resolution gets chosen by community vote, or the area rather gets chosen. So for instance, in April, we all knew we were going to be debating about antitrust. And so between April and June, everybody in the community can do research to contribute to what will be a meeting where we hammer out exactly how we're going to end up debating it. And I've been on the topic committee for a while. It's not a perfect process. It doesn't always create the best wordings, but we try to make sure that we are creating topics that hopefully will generate interest among all types of debaters, whether it's, new debaters who have no experience with debate. Part of what I found attractive when we were talking about antitrust as a topic for this year was that Facebook and Amazon and kind of the big tech companies and things like that were very high profile. And so that has been kind of an entry point for folks who, didn't necessarily think they wanted to know about antitrust law. But it turned out you all encounter things that are related to antitrust every day. And so we're actually, in the next few weeks, people are going to start beginning the process. Usually around winter break is when people start brainstorming what they think the next topic should be. So people will start writing papers to figure out what we debate about next year.
Great. The last question I have is a question about what happened to debate at UMW between 1968 and 1998. If you know anything about that, glad it's back. Sorry I missed the debate era.
So there is an article in the campus magazine. When it was back in the day, it was called Mary Washington College Today. Tim O'Donnell, who's now our provost, wrote an article and was the former director of debate, wrote an article in 2004 kind of covering that time span. Debate did exist in the late 80s and early 90s, so it wasn't quite to 98. I debated a bunch of Mary Washington teams at that point in time when I was debating for Wake Forest, and I debated at Mary Washington when Mary Washington hosted ADA, the Nationals one year. But I am not 100% sure what happened in the 70s, early 80s period. But when Dr. Morello showed up in the mid 80s from James Madison, that was when the team kind of got rejuvenated. And then there were a few, Dr. Morello, and then one of his debaters took over for a little bit, and then Tim O'Donnell, and now you got me.
Great. Well, we're in good hands. Thank you for taking the time to present to us this evening. I'd also like to thank Mark Simpkins from Events AV, who helped to facilitate the virtual logistics of tonight's program, and to our viewers at home for joining us and being a part of the conversation. Remember that this presentation will be available for viewing on the UMW YouTube channel starting tomorrow. There you can watch this program and browse the full catalog of Mary Talks. Our 6th season of Mary Talks continues in the new year on February 2nd with Dr. Kashef Majid, Associate Professor of Marketing from the College of Business, who will talk about his new course, Alleviating Food Waste. Keep an eye out for more information on that in the coming weeks. And we look forward to seeing you then, if not earlier. On behalf of the Offices of Advancement and Alumni Relations, we wish you all a safe and relaxing holiday season. Thank you and good night.